On the surface, Ethan and Clara Whitmore had it all. They were the kind of couple magazines loved to photograph. Impeccably dressed, always smiling, always perfectly composed. Ethan, at 46, was a high-profile venture capitalist who had made millions investing in fintech startups before it became mainstream. Clara, 42, was a renowned luxury fashion designer whose creations were once featured in Vogue Italia and worn by celebrities on red carpets from New York to Cannes. Together, they embodied the very image of high society success, a match of intellect, beauty, and ambition. Their Manhattan penthouse overlooked Central Park. Their dinner parties drew in tech moguls, art dealers, models, and even the occasional senator. From charity galas to exclusive yacht club weekends in the Hamptons, they were the it couple. To outsiders, they were untouchable, elegant, powerful, untarnished. But like all illusions, theirs had cracks, only visible to those who dared look closer. Beneath the glamour and glass, the Whitmore marriage had been quietly unraveling. Behind closed doors, the emotional distance between them had grown into a canyon. Ethan was consumed by work, often glued to his phone during dinner or flying internationally for conferences. Clara, for her part, had become deeply involved in the art scene, often working late at her Soho studio or attending events solo. The two had started living parallel lives, partners on paper, strangers in private. Friends whispered about it, though never aloud. There were rumors, unconfirmed. A striking intern in Ethan's office who left abruptly. Clara's frequent creative getaways that suspiciously coincided with exhibitions involving a mysterious Spanish artist. Still, both held up the facade, partly for their careers, partly out of habit, and perhaps out of fear. Divorcing would mean more than just separation. It would mean headlines. It would mean war over assets. And it would mean the public learning the truth. That Ethan and Clara, the icons of success, were just another broken couple hiding behind money and privilege. But Clara had one last idea. A desperate gamble to reignite what once existed between them. A week in Negril, Jamaica. Just the two of them. No business calls. No assistants. No distractions. A romantic getaway at a luxury cliffside resort known for its privacy and panoramic sunsets. The goal was simple: reconnection. Ethan was reluctant at first. The timing wasn't great. A new deal was in the works. But Clara insisted, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. "We need this, Ethan," she had said, "or we have nothing left." So they packed their bags, designer luggage, his ever-present laptop, her silk scarves, and boarded a private jet bound for the Caribbean. Clara posted a filtered shot of their champagne glasses mid-flight, captioned, "Paradise awaits. 2 hearts, #second chances, #Negril nights." It was liked over 14,000 times in the first hour. What her followers didn't see, however, was the silence that followed the photo. How Ethan turned back to his phone after the toast. How Clara stared out the window for nearly an hour, sipping slowly, eyes glassy, lost in thought. Neither of them knew it yet, but they were flying toward the last days of Clara's life. And Ethan, her husband, her partner, her supposed savior, would soon find himself at the center of a murder investigation that would rock both countries and leave the world asking, what really happened in Negril? Touching down in Negril felt like entering another world. The sea was a brilliant, endless stretch of turquoise. The air was heavy with the scent of salt and blooming hibiscus. Palms swayed gently against a cloudless sky as the Whitmores were chauffeured from the airport to their exclusive resort, a high-end hideaway nestled above limestone bluffs with private villas that overlooked the Caribbean Sea. Their suite was nothing short of opulent. A sprawling villa with an infinity pool, a butler on call 24/7, and a wraparound veranda that caught every sunset. The staff were discreet and trained to cater to the ultra-wealthy, which was precisely what Ethan and Clara were banking on. No paparazzi, no business calls, no press, just the illusion of escape. The first night was calm. They dined on grilled lobster and fresh mango salad, sipping white wine as a steel drum band played in the background. Clara wore a flowing silk dress, her curls pinned up, her eyes tired but hopeful. Ethan was unusually attentive, even putting his phone away. It was almost like old times. Almost We should do this more, Clara said, clinking her glass against his. Ethan nodded, his smile faint but polite. We'll see. Behind his words, Clara sensed hesitation, not about the trip, but about them. And she couldn't shake the feeling that despite the sunset, the wine, and the luxury, they were still miles apart. By day 2, the tension had crept back in. Clara spent the morning at the spa. Ethan stayed in, taking a short call that lasted nearly an hour. When she returned, his laptop was open, filled with spreadsheets and Zoom notifications. Their lunch was quiet. The spark they were supposed to be reigniting flickered against the wind of old habits. That evening, they went snorkeling together, one of Clara's ideas. A private boat took them to a coral reef where tropical fish darted through neon blue water. Clara laughed, carefree for a moment, as she floated beside Ethan. But back on the boat, she noticed his phone buzz again. A message flashed briefly on the screen before he clicked it off. Want to talk tonight? From an unsaved number. Clara didn't say anything. Not yet. Later that night, she scrolled through Ethan's phone while he showered. There was no evidence of anything. No saved conversations, no names, nothing incriminating. But the seed of doubt had been replanted, and it grew rapidly in her mind. The next morning, Clara went to the hotel bar alone. She ordered a mimosa and pulled out her sketch pad. It was something she hadn't done in months. Doodling helped her think, helped her escape. A few minutes later, a voice interrupted her thoughts. You here alone, miss? Clara looked up. He was tall, Jamaican, sun-darkened skin, mid-30s, muscular. His name tag read, Deshawn, diving instructor for the resort. Clara smiled politely. No, just alone for now. Deshawn grinned. Well, that's lucky for me. It was flirtatious, but not aggressive. Clara giggled, more from the relief of conversation than from attraction. He asked about her drawings. She asked about the reef. He offered to take her on a private diving tour. She declined, at least for that day. That night, Ethan noticed her mood was lighter. You seem relaxed, he said at dinner. Maybe I am, but the edge in her voice was unmistakable. Ethan sensed something. He always did. He asked if she was enjoying herself. She nodded. Then, almost offhand, she added, Met the dive instructor today. He's nice. Ethan raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Just took a long sip of his wine. The seeds of mistrust had now been planted in both of them. By day 4, things escalated. They argued over breakfast, quietly but with unmistakable venom. You're emotionally gone, Clara hissed through clenched teeth. You dragged me here to fix something that's already dead. Ethan snapped back. The server, awkwardly pouring coffee, quickly retreated. Clara stormed off and Ethan didn't follow. Instead, he walked along the cliffs alone, brooding. He passed the secluded garden path near the spa, the one that led down toward the rocks and the waves. And as he stood there, staring down into the crashing surf, a single thought passed through his mind. What if we never made it out of here? He shook the thought away. Later that day, Clara wasn't in the room. She didn't return his messages. By sundown, she was back, freshly showered, in a different dress. Ethan didn't ask where she'd been. She didn't offer. That night, they barely spoke. Clara posted one final Instagram story. The sun dipping below the edge of the horizon, framed perfectly by palm leaves. A tropical dream. But in the caption, she wrote only one word. Trying. It would be the last thing she ever posted. The morning of day 5 began with a strange stillness. The sound of waves crashing against the cliffs echoed softly through the villa. Birds chirped outside the window, and the sun rose with golden brilliance across the turquoise sea. But inside Villa 7 at Eden Cliffs, the bed was half-made. The sheets on Clara's side were untouched. Her white robe hung neatly on the bathroom door. Her sandals were gone, and so was she. Ethan awoke alone. He assumed at first she had gone for a walk. Clara had taken to early strolls along the cliffside paths in recent days, claiming it helped her clear her head. He wasn't concerned. Not yet. He ordered room service. Black coffee, 2 croissants. Only one was eaten. When noon came and Clara still hadn't returned, Ethan began to text. Then call. No answer. Her phone went straight to voicemail. He called the front desk. No, she hadn't checked out. No one had seen her at breakfast. A staff member mentioned she was spotted near the garden path around 7 a.m., heading toward the cliff edge. By 3 p.m., Ethan reported her missing. Security footage was pulled from the hallway cameras. One clip showed Clara exiting the villa at 6:47 a.m., wearing a white sundress and a pair of sandals. She carried a water bottle and her phone. She looked calm, purposeful. She never returned. A search was launched across the resort. The cliffside path was cordoned off. Divers began scouring the waters below. A bloodhound from the local constabulary was brought in from Montego Bay. By evening, whispers had begun to circulate among guests. A few noticed Ethan pacing in the courtyard, phone pressed to his ear. Others observed resort staff speaking to Jamaican police in hushed tones. But while chaos unfolded in Negril, headlines back home in New York were already stirring. Millionaire fashion designer reported missing in Jamaica. Ethan Whitmore's wife disappears during luxury vacation. Romantic getaway turns into nightmare in paradise. As news broke, media outlets flooded Ethan's inbox with requests. He ignored them. Inside, he was coming undone. He barely slept that night. He sat by the pool alone until past midnight, sipping rum and staring blankly at the moonlit waves. The staff noted he appeared dazed. Hollow. He didn't speak much, only nodded when approached. But while Ethan's grief seemed genuine, investigators began to dig deeper. Into their past, into their secrets, into everything the glossy magazine spreads had never revealed. In the beginning, Clara and Ethan had been equals in ambition. He, the shark in tailored suits. She, the artist-turned-entrepreneur. They thrived on each other's energy, built an empire together. But as Ethan's firm skyrocketed, he began to lose interest in the fashion world Clara inhabited. He mocked her creative friends, dismissed her ideas as frivolous. Clara, in turn, grew bitter toward his obsession with status and control. Then came Evelyn, a 29-year-old intern with a Harvard MBA and legs that seemed to go on forever. She worked late. Ethan worked later. What began as mentoring soon crossed boundaries. When Clara discovered the affair, she didn't explode. She froze, packed a bag, left for Milan for 3 weeks. She told no one. She returned with no explanation, but with icy silence in her eyes. They agreed to move on. But things were never the same. Clara threw herself into her art. She stopped designing for others and started painting. Large abstract works filled with dark shapes and bleeding reds. It was during an exhibition in Soho that she met Javier Delgado, a Spanish art dealer based in Barcelona. He was charismatic, cultured, and attentive in all the ways Ethan no longer was. There were whispers. One evening, Javier was seen exiting the Whitmore's brownstone in the early hours. Clara denied anything had happened. Ethan didn't believe her, but he never confronted her directly. Their relationship became a cold war, each emotionally armed, neither willing to surrender. As police began investigating Clara's disappearance, they unearthed these buried fractures. Clara's phone records were subpoenaed. Several recent messages were to an international number registered in Spain, Javier's. One message, sent just 2 days before she vanished, read, "You were right. He hasn't changed. I feel suffocated." Another message said, "Maybe after this trip, I'll be free." Jamaican authorities flagged it as suspicious. Was Clara planning to leave Ethan after the trip? Was Ethan aware of her continued communication with Javier? Ethan, when confronted, denied knowledge of the messages. He told police he and Clara were working things out. He admitted their marriage had been strained, but insisted she wouldn't have just walked off. "She's not impulsive like that," he said. "Something happened to her." But the problem was, too many somethings could have happened. And one by one, investigators were peeling back the layers of their luxury lifestyle, revealing the rot that had been growing underneath. The fairy tale had crumbled, and soon, paradise would reveal a much darker truth. As the Jamaican sun dipped below the horizon that evening, painting the sea in hues of fire and gold. A dark tension settled over Eden Cliffs Resort. The police search was now in full swing. The garden paths were roped off, divers combed the base of the cliffs, and tourists whispered nervously in hushed tones, stealing glances toward Villa 7. Inside, Ethan Whitmore sat at the edge of the king-sized bed, staring at nothing. The room was cold with silence. Clara's belongings still lay where she had left them, her sketchpad half-filled, a pair of sunglasses resting on the nightstand, her white robe draped over a chair. Her phone remained missing. Hotel staff reported that she had not used her keycard since early that morning. Ethan had already answered hours of police questions. Yes, they had argued during breakfast. No, she hadn't seemed distressed. No, he didn't know who she'd been texting. He claimed he had fallen back asleep after she left for her walk. Detectives weren't fully convinced. Then came another revelation. Deshaun Miller, the resort's diving instructor, had seen Clara shortly before she disappeared. When questioned further, Deshaun admitted that he and Clara had shared a drink 3 days earlier and had spoken briefly on the beach the day before. He denied any inappropriate behavior. He described her as sad but polite, a little distracted, and not the kind of tourist who flirts. Still, something about his tone made investigators press harder. Hotel staff confirmed that Clara had spent increasing time alone over the past few days. One bartender mentioned she had requested drinks to go, often in the morning. Another recalled seeing her sketching alone near the cliffs while Deshaun hovered nearby under the guise of offering diving lessons. A subtle pattern was forming. Though Deshaun insisted he was simply being friendly, surveillance footage painted a more complex picture. On the morning of her disappearance, Clara was seen leaving the villa just before 7 a.m. About 15 minutes later, a figure matching Deshaun's build was spotted walking near the cliffside trail, partially obscured by trees. The footage was grainy, inconclusive, but suspicious. When shown the clip, Deshaun initially denied it was him. Later, he admitted, "Okay, yeah, I was walking, just for air. I never saw her." Police weren't buying it. Despite being under scrutiny himself, Ethan's mind began to spiral in a different direction. He wasn't just concerned about being implicated, he was furious. Somewhere deep in his gut, he believed Clara had been hiding something. That night, he demanded access to the resort's security footage, arguing he had a right to know who might have hurt his wife. Though denied direct access, one of the security staff, possibly out of sympathy, possibly bribed, slipped him a still image from a hallway camera. In it, a blurred but familiar figure stood beside Clara outside the garden corridor. Deshaun. Ethan stared at the photo, his jaw tightening. He marched to the resort bar, asking to speak to the instructor. Deshaun wasn't on shift. In fact, no one had seen him since early that morning. One staff member reported seeing him leave the employee quarters carrying a small duffel bag. Gone. Vanished just as police were closing in. By the next morning, Jamaican detectives launched a formal manhunt for Deshaun Miller, now listed as a person of interest. Word quickly reached the media. Breaking: Jamaican dive instructor linked to Millionaire's wife's disappearance. Authorities searched his quarters. What they found raised alarm bells. Inside a locked drawer was a small velvet box. Inside the box was Clara's wedding ring, engraved with the date of their wedding, December 9, 2009. It had been removed. Next to it was a bottle of diazepam partially full, and tucked behind the mattress, an oil-stained sketch of Clara, drawn on hotel notepaper. But most chilling of all, a bloodied scarf matching the one Clara had worn in photos taken just days before her disappearance. Though no body had yet been found, the evidence was stacking up fast. What had started as a missing person case was now officially treated as a probable homicide. Faced with the reality that Clara might truly be dead, Ethan's shell began to fracture. He stopped answering calls from reporters. He stopped eating. Resort staff found him pacing endlessly, mumbling to himself. He gave police access to Clara's social media accounts, including drafts of unsent messages in her notes app. One in particular read, "This trip was supposed to fix us, but I feel more alone than ever. Sometimes I look at him and wonder if he ever really loved me." And another, Deshawn is kind, simple, free. I don't know what that means yet. It was the kind of message that explained everything and nothing. Had Clara fallen for the dive instructor? Had Deshawn misread her loneliness as interest? Or had Ethan learned of their interaction and done something unthinkable? As the investigation deepened, Clara's body had still not been found, but everyone could feel the storm coming. The glittering paradise of Negril was no longer a romantic escape. It was a crime scene, a powder keg of betrayal, secrets, and jealousy ready to blow wide open. And when it did, the truth would be bloodier than anyone imagined. The fifth day in Negril began with beauty and ended in horror. By late afternoon, the search teams had shifted from hopeful to grim. The waves below the cliffs had grown rougher, making the dive teams work more dangerous and methodical. Still, the divers pushed forward, examining every crevice along the jagged shoreline beneath Eden Cliffs Resort. Then, at exactly 4:42 p.m., a muffled radio crackled from the boat anchored 60 feet offshore. "We've got something." The discovery was made in a narrow inlet of water that crashed between two limestone formations. Wedged beneath a slab of overhanging rock was a body, bloated, pale, and lifeless. A woman, nude from the waist down. Clara Whitmore had been found. The medical examiner was flown in from Kingston. Clara's body showed signs of blunt force trauma to the left side of the head, likely caused by a rock or similar object. Her arms bore defensive wounds, deep bruises along the wrists and forearms, and a broken middle finger on her left hand. Her wedding ring was missing, so were her earrings, and her phone. She had not drowned. She had been killed before she hit the water. The pathologist later confirmed the blow to the head had rendered her unconscious or dead prior to the fall. There were also small abrasions on her upper thighs and signs of recent sexual activity. Toxicology reports would later show traces of alcohol and diazepam, the same drug found in Deshawn's employee quarters. The cliffside area where she had likely fallen, or been pushed, was marked with broken branches and footprints. But the rains from the previous night had washed much of it away. The body had drifted and lodged itself in the rocky crevice. If it hadn't been for a glint of gold, Clara's necklace catching the sunlight through the waves, it might have never been found. The recovery made headlines worldwide. Murder in paradise. Millionaire's wife found dead in Jamaican resort. Luxury getaway ends in bloodshed. Husband and local dive instructor under scrutiny. Tragedy in Negril. Who killed Clara Whitmore? Back at the resort, Ethan was notified by two plainclothes detectives. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He only asked quietly, "How bad?" The detectives hesitated before answering. Bad enough. Clara's body was transported to a morgue in Montego Bay. Ethan was brought in for questioning once more, this time not as a grieving husband, but as a potential suspect. Forensic investigators were now combing through every detail of the couple's stay. The villa was sealed off. Bedsheets were tested. Laptops confiscated. Clara's sketchpad was taken in as evidence, including a page with scribbled words. "He's not what he seems." Investigators weren't sure whether that was about Ethan or Deshawn. As the forensics team built their case, the priority shifted to locating Deshawn Miller, now officially a suspect in a homicide. The Jamaican Constabulary Force issued a warrant for his arrest. His photo was distributed to border checkpoints and airports. According to his work log, he had clocked out at 6:15 a.m. the morning Clara vanished, before his shift officially began. Witnesses later claimed they saw him on the resort's west path, near the cliffs. One bartender told police that Deshawn had looked nervous the night before, and that he had asked questions about how deep the waters were at the bottom of the cliffs. The timing was damning, but the story was still murky, and something wasn't sitting right with lead detective Inspector Naomi Campbell, a sharp, seasoned investigator with 20 years on the job. To her, this didn't feel like a premeditated act. "This smells like a crime of passion," she told the press. "Too messy, too risky." Someone snapped. The question now was, who? The narrative forming around Clara's death was turning into a triangle of suspicion. Ethan, the powerful husband with a motive of jealousy and a history of infidelity. A man desperate to keep his public image intact. Deshawn, the charming local man, possibly entangled in a forbidden fling with a vulnerable woman, now on the run, with the victim's ring in his possession. And Clara, the woman torn between two lives, longing for freedom but surrounded by danger. Ethan's legal team acted fast. Within 24 hours of Clara's body being found, he retained an elite U.S. defense attorney, Michael Stanford, who flew into Montego Bay with an entourage of assistants and media liaisons. At a press conference outside the police station, Stanford made a brief statement. Mr. Whitmore is devastated. He had no involvement in the tragic death of his wife. We trust the Jamaican authorities will find the true culprit. Mr. Whitmore has nothing to hide. But the eyes of the world weren't so convinced. Neither was Inspector Campbell. As the sun set over Negril that night, lightning flashed far out over the ocean, a summer storm gathering offshore. The waves grew louder, crashing against the same rocks that had hidden Clara's body for over 36 hours. Inside the interrogation room, Ethan leaned forward, elbows on the table, his voice low. I didn't kill her, but if she was seeing that man, he might have. The detective across from him said nothing, just slid forward a still image from the resort camera. Clara and Deshawn in the early hours walking together toward the cliffs. There was no timestamp, just silence. Ethan stared at it, then whispered, Jesus. Clara had vanished in the dawn light. By dusk, the paradise she dreamed of escaping into had become her tomb. And for Ethan and Deshawn, only one truth could remain standing. The autopsy confirmed Clara was murdered, blunt force trauma to the head, and possible sexual assault. Her ring was found in Deshawn's room, along with sedatives. Ethan insisted he had no involvement, but suspicions remained. A full manhunt was launched for Deshawn, who had disappeared after Clara's death. Police believed he was hiding with help from locals. Investigators dug deeper into Clara's phone. Messages to Javier, her former lover in Spain, revealed she was planning to leave Ethan after the trip. Ethan denied knowing. Clara's final messages hinted at fear, of being watched, of being trapped. This raised the possibility she had confided in Deshawn, who may have used her vulnerability. Ethan's timeline was shaky. He claimed to be asleep, but a staff member saw him walking alone near the cliffs shortly after Clara left the villa. Meanwhile, Deshawn's time card was forged. He never clocked in that day. Police believed both men were lying about something, but couldn't yet prove who was lying about murder. After a tip, Deshawn was found hiding in his cousin's fishing shack outside Negril. He confessed to sleeping with Clara but denied killing her. He claimed she asked him to run away with her. He said they met that morning on the cliffs, argued, and she slipped during the fight. But the head wound said otherwise. The trial began in Jamaica. Ethan testified, painting Clara as unstable. Deshawn's defense portrayed Ethan as a jealous, controlling husband. Forensic evidence tied Deshawn to the scene, but no one could definitively say who killed her. The courtroom was packed with media. Clara's parents sat in silence every day. Deshawn was convicted of manslaughter, not murder. There wasn't enough evidence to prove intent. Ethan returned to the U.S., legally cleared but publicly shamed. Many believed he had orchestrated the entire thing and left no proof. Clara's death remained clouded in doubt. Ethan sold his companies and moved to a private island. Deshawn began his 15-year sentence in a Jamaican prison. Clara's parents filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Ethan and won a $12 million settlement. The resort quietly rebranded. Guests no longer requested Villa 7. Months later, one of Clara's unfinished paintings, of a bleeding red sky over jagged cliffs, sold for over $3 million. Critics called it haunting. Some believed she painted her own death without realizing it. No one knows what truly happened on those cliffs. Was it Deshawn's crime of passion? Ethan's perfect plan? Or something else entirely? Only two people knew the truth, and one of them was buried 6 feet under, her final thoughts forever lost to the sea.